On, engaging your audience to trend on you. We are back with our guest Jim Rice on our third Giant Cheesehead, the great games of the Gridiron, and now 92 years we are talking and trending on the Bears-Packers rivalry. So Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me back for the third time. That's,
third time is a charm.
That's more than I usually get asked back, so that's a good sign.
We're doing well. So I should also say that Tamara Leigh's Trend On is part of the Link Local Network, and we are live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on the Link Local Network with Tamara Leigh's Trend On, engaging your audience to trend on you. I am the founder of Tamara Leigh LLC, a communications expertise company meeting the needs of clients on multiple communications platforms for mobile, social, content writing, image and style consulting, and lots more. So check out my website at TAMARALEIGHLLC.com. So I am so excited to talk about the Packers always. I was going to say, I was going to wear my Cheesehead, but then I'm working on I'm a classy Cheesehead girl, so I was trying to put together one that has brie cheese on it.
Oh, brie.
So that would be me. But I'm excited about your new book. So we'll recap maybe just quickly on the other ones, and then we'll talk about your new one.
Good.
So where are we at?
It all began right here with this one on the Packers and Giants, the rivalry and some of the connections between the teams. Then we jump over here to Great Games of the Gridiron, which, by the way, I thought, gee, how did somebody not use that title before me? I mean, that's just such an easy one, but fortunatly nobody did.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So Google search and you're good.
Right. And that's about the 33 NFL championship games before the Super Bowl started.
Okay.
The Super Bowl got going in 1966. And the one we're here to talk about today is 92 years, which is literally, we're now in the 93rd year of the rivalry between the Packers and the Bears.
I have to point this out for all of you.
Oh, yes.
Well, a couple things here. You can also check out our other Cheesehead videos that we've done at TamaraLeighLLC.com, or just, YouTube us. You can find our other videos that we've done.
And it's on GiantCheeseheads.com, too.
Okay. All right. So Jim asked me with this book, I'm kind of excited, so I'm going to show off a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
So here's my little introduction about what a great book it is. In 92 years, Jim Rice chronicles the dates and details of football's greatest rivalry in his enjoyable, easy-to-read style, written for both the die-hard fan and the newbie. Rice delights readers and does his due diligence in researching his work. Tamara Leigh, host of Tamara Leigh's Trend On.
Surprise.
I know. I am under Dennis Krause, who any Packer fan would know.
Right,
that
Dennis
he's
Krause.
the Packers Radio Network.
Yes.
So thank you for that little shout out.
Well, thank you for helping me shout out about the book.
And it's all true.
It is. It's all true. She never lies.
That was not creative writing at its best.
So, no, I appreciate that. And it's been an interesting journey, the three books. So.
Okay, so fun. So let's start with what's going on now.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of dance back through the decades, as it were, of that history of the rivalry and get us back to from whence they came 92 years ago.
Way back.
So what is going on now with the Bears and Packers? Where do we stand in terms of this season, how it impacts the playoffs?
Okay. Well, 92 years is a lot of history, and there have been a lot of games. There's been 189 games up till today. That includes the first game of this year. The Bears lead the rivalry. They've won 93 games.
Really?
The Packers have won only 90, and there have been 6 ties.
So they're pretty evenly split.
Yeah.
So really, in terms of, and they are the oldest rivalry in the NFL.
Right.
And so in terms of matched up.
Yeah, they've been playing longer than any other two teams ever in the history of the NFL. The rivalry has not been as close as 3 since 1941. And the Packers, you may not know this and may not believe it, but the Packers have not led the rivalry since 1932.
Okay, come on, Packers.
Yeah,
so in terms of this, where we're at getting caught up, had a lot to do with I mean, Rogers
Yeah.
is holding his own.
Right.
I
He's
mean,
done well.
Yeah.
He's won, was it 10 of 13 games, I think, against the Bears. But the only reason we're really this close is because of Brett Favre. And I have to say, I'll make it real quick.
Okay.
You know, when you study this
Yeah.
history, just like when you study history of the world and all that kind of stuff, everything always just keeps repeating. It really does. And, you know, we got all upset at Favre when he left a couple of years back, and how could he ever do that? Well, I think it's interesting because Don Hudson kind of pulled the same thing with the Packers. He never quite was as dramatic as Brett about if he was coming back the next year or not, but he always talked about retirement. George Halas, coaching against the guy, saved his plans that he had just for Don Hudson for 5 years after Hudson left because he was never quite convinced that Hudson
He was really
had actually gone.
Maybe that's where
Right.
Favre learned it
They-
from.
well-
And it sets it up for, okay, if we're tied this close with the Bears, so this season, so we've got one win against the Bears already.
Right, so if we
So the
win
next
on
game-
the 9th of November,
That might be Super Bowl.
Right, that would be
a good
around
time
the
to
Super
win.
Bowl, yes. Then we would have it down to 2.
Okay.
The Bears would only be leading by 2, and so next year would be an opportunity to
Okay.
bring that
In
to a.
case you don't know this, Packers, just FYI, track that little history there.
Mhm,
We have the chance to go ahead.
That's right.
Should I
Not
call
since
Mike?
32, not since 32.
And then I want to ask with your book, talking about that, where there
Yes.
was the Favre era,
Yes.
how did you break down the book in terms of the history? Did you just follow chronologically?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's quite a lot of games. It's 188 games. So I went at it by decades. And each decade, I kind of introduce what's happening in the NFL beyond the Packers and the Bears, if there really is anything, you know. But in fairness to others, what was going on in the world, what was going on in the NFL. And so that kind of leads in each decade. You know, it's an amazing thing when you think about the rivalry. You know, they've been playing since 1921. They missed a year because of a financial situation in 22. Then from 23 on, they played every year up to the present, with the exception of 1982, when there was a strike.
Oh,
And so, you know, the strike really stopped the streak. But, you know, playing since 1921 is just incredible.
that's an amazing cultural study all by itself of how football has survived through world wars,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, conflict of the U.S., and yet without missing a beat, that
Yeah.
has continued.
Yeah, and it was the rivalry, while it was different then, it was just as intense, if not more. In the early going in the NFL in the 20s and 30s, the Packers and Bears, what are they? They won 13 of the first 25 championships, so they got everybody's attention as far as, you know, pro football, because, you know, people really like college football and boxing and baseball a lot more than pro football back in the beginning. And so
Wow, who would have thought? I wonder, Curly Lambeau probably had no
right,
idea what it would
right. I mean, it's
become.
just amazing. And but Halas and Lambeau were two of the guys that hung in there and really believed that there was an appetite for pro football. Everybody else liked college, but they believed we could even be better than college. And so the 20s and 30s, there was really something how they believed in themselves.
So you can't really go back through the, you know, we talk about Favre, and then you go back a little bit and you hit the Ditka era. And of course, I mean, Ditka and Chicago Bears are,
Right, right. I mean, Mike Ditka, I think, as I said something along the line in the book, that he spanned 3 decades of the rivalry, you know, not only as a player, but as a coach, and, you know, even now still as an analyst and a broadcaster, you know.
Yeah.
Ditka, you know, coached at a time when Forrest Gregg was coaching the Packers, and so
okay.
they used to play each other on the field.
Yeah.
Ditka was a tight end and Gregg was
I
a
do
tackle.
remember that.
So they had some history there, and, you know, the Packer-Bear rivalry on top of their personal history. And so their times when they played each other were very
Now, is that
interesting.
a situation with those two in their coaching roles where, like in Giant Cheesehead, we talked about Tom Landry and Lombardi having come from the Giants
Right,
together?
right.
Did that sort of have an impact on football, the way that the Landry-Lombardi? no?
Not in the same way. Not in the same
Not
way.
that.
Because Ditka and Gregg never really actually worked together. They were
Okay.
constantly against each
Oh,
other,
okay.
even at the very
Okay.
beginning. But it is interesting. You mentioned Landry. Now, I would get off to
Yeah.
show you how all these kind of things are related here. you know, it could be said that until Forrest Gregg, okay, and Herb Adderley, another great Packer from the 60s, until they got to Dallas and played for Tom Landry, Dallas didn't win.
Ah.
So if you take that really a step further, there were a lot of people that believed that those two guys taught Dallas how to win the big games, that there were some issues in big games, which you could say there were.
Maybe
and-
still today. I don't know.
Well, we don't know. We'll see how
We're
they
watching.
do. Yeah.
Although, yeah, they did all right. I was
Yes,
watching
they're
the Cowboys
doing
a
pretty
little
well.
bit.
But
That's
yeah,
Wisconsin boy Tony Romo.
so Greg and Romo now, but Greg and Adderley helped Dallas at the end of their careers to learn how to win, and so it's kind of interesting you mentioned Landry
Yeah.
because he's always involved in stuff. So.
Okay, so we go back. So Ditka influential in that rivalry, and then
And it was real dirty at the Ditka Greg time. I mean,
shocking.
two
What?
Hall of
Chicago
Fame,
dirty?
yeah, two Hall of Fame coaches though, both of them.
Okay.
But they refused to rein in their players. They allowed their players to do whatever in the name of football. And
That must be. My dad was talking about like the day of like they'd break knuckles in the huddle, or
oh yeah,
I mean, really?
yeah.
Okay, so in the 40s, you have something from your book you're going to share with us a
Yes.
little bit that
In the
gives readers a taste for what
In the 20
taste for cheese.
Taste for cheese. In the 20s and 30s, you know, both of the teams, the Packers and the Bears, were good. Okay, Packers especially, but the Bears had their moments. But the 40s, the Bears were really king. The Packers kind of won a championship, but basically the 40s belonged to the Bears. And a friend of mine said after he bought the book, he was going to read the little passages about each game, which, you know, some are longer than most,
Yeah.
others are short little things because of the brevity of the game or the information, as kind of an indoctrination thing for his little child, who's now 3, to learn about the Packers' history and just to, you know, read them to sleep every night.
What a
you
dad.
know? And so I thought, well, that's really nice that my book is being used in that way.
Yes, yeah,
But then
very
I thought,
educational of you.
Well, yes, I being the old educator. So I started thinking, gee, I wonder how he would say this to his kid.
Okay.
Now, obviously, he could say, well, that's the end of the game. You know, he doesn't have to read all this. But if he did want to read everything, he'd
Yeah.
have to say about this game, 1946, September 29th, the Bears win 30-7. After all the details about the game, there's like little highlights, little non-game kind of stuff that I put in there. And here's what I'd wonder how he would read this to his child. On one play, Green Bay and Carl Molyneux suffered, quote, 5 dislocated vertebrae, a concussion, a broken nose, facial cuts, and 3 broken teeth. He never played again, and 3 other Packer players left the game with injuries. So, you know, he'll probably just jump right over that one a little
Yeah,
bit,
like,
you know.
ow.
Yeah,
Did
but
they
those
not wear helmets or
well,
what?
they wore helmets, but you got to remember 46 right after the war,
Oh.
from like 45 to 55, the rivalry was as tough, you know, probably tougher and more nasty than even the Ditka Greg era.
Maybe there was a
because
little
they were back from the war.
PTS, yeah.
Yeah, they
Taking
were.
out
A
that
lot of
war
people were
thing.
back from the war. They
No,
had
it's just a game, guys.
they had seen much worse than, you know, on the battlefield than
Yeah.
on the football field, and they were tough as nails. And that was an indicator just in that particular game. But that stuff happened a lot. And so the 40s go by. The Bears are dominant. Go ahead.
I
You were
want
gonna
to,
say.
not to stop your momentum, but I noticed too, heading in there, Wrigley Field.
Right.
So that may be a little tidbit of history that people don't realize.
Right. The great early games between the Packers and the Bears all happened at Wrigley Field. They did play in Soldier Field, though, once in 1926. Now, a lot of people don't know that because they
So
moved.
Soldier Field was around
Yeah,
that long. So
yeah.
it wasn't that it wasn't built.
Right. It was there.
Did they play like Milwaukee and Green Bay back and forth?
No, they only played in Soldier Field once, the Packers and the Bears. And then they
okay.
went to Wrigley, and then they went back to Soldier Field like in the 70s, I want to say.
Really?
Yeah, so that's kind of something that most people don't
Huh.
know. But yeah, Wrigley was the
See what you
home.
can learn from this book.
Wrigley was the home for most Bear games. In fact, Hallis deliberately, you know, when he changed the name from the Staleys back in the 20s, you know, he chose the Bears in a deliberate connection
The Bears
to
were called the Staleys?
yeah, back before, yeah. It was owned by a family by that name. And
Oh.
so Hallis changed the name, and he deliberately connected with the Cubs by calling them the Bears.
Oh,
And then
sure.
they played right there, too. The Cubs were very popular, and he needed to make pro
Were
football
they
more
bad back then
popular.
too? Sorry, Cubs fan.
They kind of had some difficulties, but, so that whole Hallis thing is so important in the beginning of
Yeah.
football, and it connected it right to baseball too, so.
Okay.
So then we get, what, 50s,
Back,
into the
right.
50s? The Packers are god-awful in the 50s. They called Green Bay Siberia, nobody wanted to play there. Bears were better, not as good as they were in the 40s, but they did get to the 56 championship game. They didn't win, but they were much more competitive than the Packers. And then you get to Lombardi for
Okay,
at
so
least
that's
us.
where
Yeah.
the game changer came
Yeah,
in.
yeah. So Lombardi shows up in '59. Everybody wanted the Packers to move then, get out of Green Bay. You got a dumpy old stadium. This was in the before '57. You got a dumpy old stadium. You don't have a good team. They build a new stadium, but they have their worst year ever before Lombardi gets there in '58. They win one game. Lombardi comes and everything changes, and the game becomes more serious for the players. There's more discipline, and there's a belief in how to win football, which was something that escaped them for a number of years.
Number of decades,
And
yeah.
so Hallis then has a new
Rivalry?
antagonist,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Lombardi. Hallis and Lambeau weren't too buddy-buddy. They respected one another. Hallis and Lombardi kind of had a closer friendship. There was real admiration there.
Okay.
They played each other 18 times. Lombardi had his number. Lombardi won 13 of the 18 games.
Nice.
Frustrated Hallis
Yeah.
beyond belief. And there was a lot of spying on teams and alleged spying, watching each other's practices.
Yeah.
So the rivalry was probably, in a nice way, never more intense in a nice way than it was in the 60s. Because they played fair. They were
Right.
tough, but
Right.
they weren't having wrestling matches constantly like they were in the 40s and 50s. And nobody was picking up somebody like they did in the 80s and slamming them onto the ground that they did to a certain Chicago Bear quarterback. They didn't do those nasty things like that. But the spirited rivalry in the 60s produced the best football between them. So it was just amazing.
All right, well, you certainly covered the whole span of things. Is there anything back besides that we haven't covered back in the beginning you want to just highlight, or surprises, or no?
No,
Putting you
except
on the spot.
I would say, though, I gained a newfound respect for the Bears. I mean, I'm a Packer fan, but if it wasn't for Hallis and the Bears, the Packers wouldn't be in Green Bay.
Right, well,
They
that's
would have
what,
long
by
been gone.
virtue of that protagonist, antagonist,
Right.
that's what makes it great, when you
Right.
have iron sharpening iron, or, that
Yeah.
rivalry.
They needed
that-
each other
right,
in a
you do.
way. They
You
needed
raised
each
the
other.
bar for both
Yeah,
teams.
and even the Giants wanted the Packers to stay in Green Bay. And a lot of teams were frustrated because they'd rather have had them in Milwaukee, and then they wouldn't have to, take the
Right.
crazy bus ride back in
Right.
the 30s and 40s and to get up there. And those big cities held firm and supported Green Bay.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the neatest thing, being an old New Yorker, that I really
Yeah.
liked.
Yeah.
And shows the respect that big cities had for Green Bay.
I think if we can have that appreciation for the history and the respect, it just adds so much more to
Sure.
those games.
So it's down to 3.
Okay, so.
Down to 3, so they play on November 9th. The book and all of this fun stuff is all available through my website, giantcheeseheads.com.
Okay.
It's also available on Amazon, and the Facebook page is particularly interesting with all the pictures
Yeah.
from the great games.
Well, and you do a great job with little tidbits.
And the
throwing out
trivia
there,
and that
the
kind of
trivia,
stuff.
yeah.
So it's, being an old history teacher, it's just a different kind of history that I love and enjoy sharing.
There's probably some women out there who would want to get these and say, stuff this into your stocking, guys.
Well, there you go. Especially the smaller ones, you can wrap right
Yeah,
up.
there
This
you
one's
go.
a little too
That
big.
one's a little meatier.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
little meatier. And the 3 of them together are $40, 10, 10, and 20. And
Okay.
I'll even personally deliver them in southeastern Wisconsin within, a certain mileage distance.
Wow.
So
You
how
bring
about
cheese
that?
curds and a
Yeah,
beer?
there we go. Cheese
Call
curds
it
and
a
a beer.
party.
Yeah. And Brett wanted
Yeah.
something to do, so maybe he'll come.
Okay,
up.
oh yes,
So,
there you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
There's my little call to action, wrapping this whole thing up.
Yes, yes.